Committed, codependent, or cautious, this study investigates shared perceptions of biosecurity and flock management among Bangladesh chicken producers. Bangladesh, as many other Asian low and middle income countries, is experiencing an intensifying poultry production due to the increasing demand for animal-derived proteins. This is characterized by high densities of birds, which often live under poor hygienic conditions. There is a frequent movement of people and vehicles, and multiple stakeholders are involved in the very complex poultry production and marketing chains. Important to mention here would be, for example, mobile traders operating between farms and live bird markets, or the more powerful feed dealers who do not only trade with feed but also with chicks, drugs, and credits. All these factors contribute and encourage the transmission and spread of infectious diseases. This could be prevented by biosecurity. But what is the role of biosecurity in the country? Farmers usually have a broad knowledge of biosecurity and appreciate its value. However, consistency and continuity of implementation vary considerably. We were therefore interested in the drivers of decision-making behind these variable levels of biosecurity implementation. Our objective was to classify Bangladesh chicken producers into groups by exploring and identifying their shared perceptions of biosecurity and flock management. There are multiple chicken types raised for human consumption in the country, but our study focused on the white-feathered commercial broiler as seen in the pictures below. This study was conducted in the southeastern part of Bangladesh, which is highlighted in red in the map on the right-hand side, which is Chattogram Division, between March and July 2019. We enrolled 30 commercial broiler farmers in this study. We made use of a specific methodology called the Q methodology, which was originally invented by a psychologist in 1935. It combines both quantitative and qualitative elements and is therefore considered a mixed methods approach. In principle, it's an adaptation of factor analysis where participants instead of measurements act as variables. It is used to examine the range of perceptions of a particular topic of interest shared among a particular population of interest. Typically in Q methodology, we would start generating a set of items which is usually textual or visual of nature and should be representative of the topic of interest. In our case, we choose opinion statements to be representative of biosecurity and flock management. These items in the following step are sorted in a very particular way by the participants. They have to distribute the generated items into a predefined sorting grid which follows a forced frequency distribution. This will become clearer on the following slides when I show our own example. Moreover, these items should be sorted relative to each other, and thereby we obtain unique sorting patterns for the participants. During the statistical analysis, these unique sorting patterns are correlated with each other, and factors are extracted from the resulting correlation matrix. The extracted factors are used to group participants with similar sorting patterns. As a last step, the extracted factors are interpreted in a holistic way by combining the quantitative output of the factor analysis, the qualitative output of the interviews conducted at the same time, as well as the demographic information of the participants and the subjective interpretation of the research team. For the first step, for the generation of items, we choose to generate 40 opinion statements about biosecurity and flock management. We did so by conducting 16 semi-structured interviews and one focus group discussion with a similar group of farmers, however not the same group of farmers. And we provided our research team with a list of themes that should be covered and a couple of open-ended questions. Those comprised reasons for and against biosecurity implementation, advantages and disadvantages of different biosecurity measures, their feasibility and effectiveness as well as their cost, then sources of information and advice for farmers, and also their response to disease outbreaks. We recorded all of these interviews and the discussions so that later on we could screen the recordings for specific statements. Those that were matching our list of themes and were relevant were transcribed, further selected and edited. For example, repetitive or redundant words needed to be deleted. However, we tried to keep the common language and expressions of the farmers as original as possible. The 40 selected opinion statements were then printed on 40 cards with the statement texts in Bengali language and script on one side and the statement numbers on the other side. Here I'm just displaying the 40 opinion statements for your reference. We will not go into them in detail. I will just read two of them as an example, and you can have a look at them later. Number 10 would be, if I do not clean and disinfect my farm regularly, I will face economic loss. Number 30 would be, I trust my feed dealer more than anyone else. I hope these examples make it easier for you to follow. In the next step, the 30 commercial broiler farmers that were enrolled in this study had to sort these 40 opinion statements into a predefined sorting grid. You can see this grid on the left-hand side. It consists of 40 empty boxes where the 40 opinion statements should be placed, and a scale ranging from -4, not at all like me, to +4, very much like me. Participants were encouraged to start at the two extremes of the scales and to work from there until the neutral midpoint 0. They were not allowed to place more than one card on each box, and each box had to be filled with a card. Participants usually finished after 30 to 45 minutes, and we conducted in-depth interviews with them to find out more about their choice, particularly their choice at the two extremes of the scale. As you can see on the pictures, we usually found a quiet place, such as the farmer's house or around the farm, where they would not be disturbed by external observers and could concentrate on reading and placing the cards. Thereby, we obtained one unique sorting pattern per participant, and all of these sorting patterns were entered into a data matrix with participants as rows and opinion statements as columns. We analyzed this data matrix with a specialized software called PQ method, which correlated the sorting patterns with each other and extracted factors from the resulting correlation matrix. We then rotated the factors to reduce any correlation between factors and identified those sorting patterns that were loading significantly on each of the factors. Thereby, we were already grouping participants and their respective sorting patterns according to how much they loaded on each of the factors. Then finally, for the presentation of results, we calculated weighted averages of the defining sorting patterns for each factor. We obtained three factors which represented 54% of the total explained variance. They correspond to three groups of commercial broiler farmers with similar perceptions of biosecurity and flock management. We called these three groups the committed, the codependent, and the cautious. The first group consisted of 9 participants who were on average 30 years old and managed 1,800 broilers in 2 sheds. They seemed very committed to the implementation of biosecurity, as they claimed not to share farm utensils with each other, neither did they allow other people to enter their sheds. They were very aware of infectious diseases that could affect poultry and knew how they were transmitted. Therefore, they appreciated the benefits of biosecurity, and they were happy to spend time on cleaning. They didn't bother at all. They were also willing to spend money on it as they considered it a good investment in terms of saving money for drugs or the veterinarian. They also showed a sense of responsibility towards their environment, as they did not want to sell sick chickens to the live bird market in view of the public health impact this may entail, and they also did not want to bury sick chickens in their backyard to protect other poultry that are free roaming, such as backyard chickens or ducks, from infection. This group may be considered the ideal farmer that are following all the guidelines, all the recommendations that are made on biosecurity, and they act quite independently without influence from others. The second group, the codependent, comprised 8 participants who were on average 38.5 years old and managed 1,300 broilers. This group seemed to be very dependent in their decision-making and appeared to rely heavily on external advice. They claimed to trust the feed dealer more than anyone else and to consult him before taking any decision in their farm. If they found disease in their poultry, they would also consult the veterinarian first before taking any action. They seemed not to be confident about their own knowledge and expertise. For example, they were also not confident enough to go to the pharmacy and buy drugs themselves. On the other hand, social media did not seem to play an important role as source of information. Moreover, they claimed not to change their usual practice when a disease outbreak on another farm was detected. This group was significantly older than the other two groups and could therefore rely on different stakeholders in terms of information and advice. The last group, the cautious, comprised 4 participants who were on average 31.5 years old and managed on average 2,500 broilers in 3 sheds. This group seemed very worried about the introduction of pathogens into their poultry flocks. For example, in case of disease outbreaks on other farms, they would spray more disinfectant than usually to avoid disease introduction. They would also increase the frequency of application during winter when migratory birds arrive. Moreover, they claimed to spray themselves, their clothes and shoes each time before entering the shed. This group was also characterized by a strong suspicion towards feed dealers. They neither trusted nor involved them in the decision-making process. Similarly, they did not like to listen to more experienced farmers. All in all, this group was very suspicious of other stakeholders and wanted to be independent. This could be explained by the fact that they managed a larger number of broilers and are therefore more experienced. They may also be financially independent and did not need to rely on feed dealers. Since they are managing a larger number of broilers, they may also be more cautious as they would have more to lose in case of a disease outbreak on their farm. Finally, we identified 3 groups of commercial broiler farmers with similar perceptions of biosecurity and flock management. These groups may be used to design and tailor targeted intervention which address their group-specific needs. We also learned more about stakeholder relationships in the context of Bangladesh poultry production and marketing chains, such as who are the trusted advisors and what are the established channels of communication for commercial broiler farmers. The participants of our study showed great curiosity and interest in the methodology. However, there were also limitations. For example, the set of opinion statements we used may not have been representative of the full range of topics associated with biosecurity and flock management. We may have missed important aspects that were not covered. Also, the sorting process came with difficulties. We usually gave the farmers a pile of cards, and typically they would spend more time reading and sorting the first few cards than the last few cards of the pile. They also did not have complete freedom in distribution as they had to follow the forced frequency distribution. We therefore may not have captured all possible configurations and all possible perceptions of the topic of interest. Finally, and maybe most importantly, there is a social desirability bias associated with this study, since farmers may not have been honest when sorting the cards related to bad practices and risky behavior in order not to shed a bad light on their own farming practices. This is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for listening and watching this recording. If you have any questions, comments, or would like to know more about this study, please feel free to contact me under the email addresses shown on the slide. Thank you.